So while you're getting comfy, I'm just going to chat a bit. So we're still on bones, still on that idea of creating the internal map of our, just our internal map, really. And bones, of course, you know, you don't get much more inside than that. They are our structure. And they're very good to, when we get a sense of the bones in the body, when we get a sense of that skeleton and how we are set up, it's a very good anchor then for thinking your directions, you know, directing this bone away from that, or the front of this hip bone away from the front of the other hip bone, and all of this kind of thing. And we're going to use again this idea that gravity is our friend, because as you're lying there, resting in your semi-supine position, oh, and for the benefit of new other people, I shall just do that so you can see, in case anyone's doing this on capture. So lying in that semi-supine position, knees bent, head on a support. Oh, lovely, lovely position. You have got what we might call resting points, bits of you that are more solidly in connection and in contact with the ground. And it's those resting points that we're going to look at today, those weighty bits of bone that are resting into the ground. And even if there's a bit of padding around those bones, they're still resting. So we'll start with the head, and it is resting on your block or your book or your cushion, or your support. So as you're becoming aware of that back of your head, the contact with the back of the head and the ground, you might become aware of whether you are pulling your head into the ground or holding your head off the ground. And we want neither of those. We want the head to be resting. And in order for it to rest, in order for the full weight, appropriate weight of the head to just rest into your block or cushion or support, you need to have a free neck. The neck muscles need to be doing less. So in your mind, thinking your thinking directions, you're going to ask for those back of ear muscles to let go, the base of the skull to release and undo, thinking down from the ears, down the sides of the neck, across the shoulders. So you're softening around the whole column of the neck, even from under the chin down the front of the throat. If you're a jaw gripper, have an easy jaw, ungripped, and a soft tongue. And as you're letting that head rest on the support, you know where the back of it is. You can feel the back of it. Just know in your mind where the forehead is, where the front of it is. And know that as the neck releases, the head is balanced sort of forward of the spine, like a little tipping hinge. So there we are, releasing the neck, freeing the neck, and letting the head rest appropriately on the support. And the next points of contact or point of contact is going to be something around the back of your shoulders. And I can't be 100% specific here, because depending on the organization and orientation of your shoulder girdle and your back and your arms, it will depend on which bits of your shoulder area, upper back, are in contact with the ground. So only you can know this. But let's start generally thinking about the back of your left shoulder. Generally thinking about that contact, wherever it is on your body that you can feel at the back of you on the left-hand side. And know that that's gravity below you, pulling you, that force of gravity pulling you to the center of the earth, pulling that shoulder back. But you don't want to be pressing it back or shoving it back or doing anything funny like that. We want a sense of release through the front of chest, the neck, the armpit, the back of shoulder, shoulder blade area, so that that point of contact that you can feel either grows and expands or just becomes clearer and clearer. And the weight of the shoulder drops through that point of contact into the ground, hopefully not in an uncomfortable way. And then knowing that that shoulder is there, resting away, that point of contact that you have, think your way or widen your way across the back to the other shoulder, to the right hand shoulder. And as you're letting that right hand shoulder become in your awareness, note contact with the floor. It might not be the same. You might not have an evenness through the back of the shoulders. You might find that you're able to release this one more than the other or less than the other, but essentially we're doing the same thing. We're releasing, asking for a letting go around the neck, the side of the neck, the top of the shoulder, the front of it, under the armpit, top of the arm, round around the shoulder blade. So we're really allowing the weight of the shoulder to rest back into the ground. And again, not because we're forcing it or doing anything funny with it, but because we're letting it go and it is heavy. We're letting go in the tops of the arms and they are heavy. So now that you've become more aware of the points of contact through your upper back, we're going to think those 2 points of contact away from each other. So you're using that as a reference point. So the point of contact behind the right shoulder, the point of contact behind the left shoulder, and then now you're thinking those 2 points away from each other, encouraging your back to widen. So if it's just your shoulder blades that you can feel on the ground, you just think the left shoulder blade away from the right shoulder blade, or the left back of arm away from the right back of arm, asking for that lovely expansive widening back. And of course, included in that widening back will be your widening front as well. And then from there, we're going to go down to the next lot of heavy old points of contact, and that's going to be around your bum and your pelvis, or back of bum, I should say, and pelvis. So there, if we wanted to think about that whole back as a rectangle shape, and we've got 2 top corners here with the shoulders, the back of the shoulders, and then we're going to take our awareness down to the back of another corner of that rectangle, and that's the back of your hip. It might be the back of the sort of a bony bit of hip that you can feel. It might be more towards the sacrum. It's really, again, going to depend on the shape of you, what bits of you are resting. So we're finding the resting point at the back of the hip on the left-hand side. And you're using that resting point as a reference to allow the weight of you to drop through and into the ground. You're using that reference point as somewhere to direct away from, release into. And as your awareness increases around that back of the hip, have a flicker of a thought round to the very top of your thigh, around the groin, and really close to the pelvis, around the top of the thigh, and asking for that to let go a bit. Asking for that freedom and ease. And then again, as you let the weight of that thigh bone drop into the hip socket a bit, just know where that contact point is at the back of the hip. So remember your nice easy breathing, not focusing so much on all this concentrating that you've lost any sense of that, but a nice bit of out and in through the flexible ribs. Just nice and easy breathing. And then we're going to know where that is, know where that back of hip is, that contact point resting into the ground. Think your way across the back of the pelvis to the other corner of your rectangular back. And that's that other contact point. It's the point of view that the weight is dropping through at the back of your hip. Know where it is. Again, hopefully not uncomfortable, but just a sense of contact and weight. And around that area, you're asking for letting go, of freedom. And it might be that actually what's needed is a letting go, a thought to freeing off the band of fascia around the top of your thigh, really close to the pelvis and the groin. And then as that heavy thigh bone drops back into your hip socket, that helps something else to let go, and that contact, that weight of you connects more deeply with the ground. And so here across your pelvis, I'm hoping in your awareness now you've got two of these very strong contact points, one on the left and one on the right. And in the same way as we were doing the back of the shoulders, we're thinking these contact points away from each other. We're using that physical awareness as a reference to direct widening across the lower back, widening across the back of the pelvis. So this is very focused and there is a lot of concentration. So at any time that you need to release your jaw or let your neck move or your legs move or anything like that, don't let this intense focus create tension, because that would be rather unhelpful. So we're then going to say, okay, here's our hips, here's our weighty hips, and they are these points of contact now as a together point of contact. And you're going to be aware of the length of your back now. So from those two hip contact points, the left and the right, we're thinking up the back or up through the sides of the body, choice is yours, up towards the resting shoulder contact points, the most prominent parts of the back of your upper back resting into the ground. And when you've got these kind of 4 contact points, you can be really free with it. You could say, well, now I'll think my shoulders away from each other. I'll use that reference, that weighty reference, and think my shoulders away from each other. You could go for a diagonal, shoulder away from hip, because again, you've got this awareness. You know where they are. When you know where something is, you can direct between it, something away from something. You could say to yourself, there's my resting entire back, because I have now these 4 contact points and they're all resting down into the ground. And I want to direct length up the back of my neck, because I want my head again to rest more easily on those blocks, on that support. So again, another contact point. And then no matter where your arms are, whether your arms are by your sides or whether the hands are over on your abdomen, we're going to use your elbows as a contact point. That's some section of that bit of your arm. So normally you can kind of feel some part of your elbow on the ground. And the lovely thing about the elbow is that it's generally aligned in line with that diaphragm area, that sort of rib area that we're forever trying to release and free. So in your mind, letting your arms be nice and heavy, you're going to say, yes, there's my elbows. Can you find a way of allowing the weight to drop through your elbow? It's just a thought. It's a thought process. In your mind, you say, there's my elbows, and I let them drop down into the ground as if they're heading on down to Australia, as we would say. And then keeping that sense of freedom or undoing in the arms, keeping that sense of weight through the upper arms, the forearms, and the elbow. You're going to think your elbows away from each other. You're thinking the elbow on the left side to the left and the elbow on the right side to the right. You are thinking your elbows away from each other. And as you execute this direction, this thinking direction, elbows away from each other, you might find that something releases through your ribs or your abdomen, your diaphragm. There might be a sense of the middle of your back widening. So you're using this as a tool to help you locate and release and widen in the middle of your back. It's a really handy one. And then go back to your weighty head. Free that neck again. Soften your face. Head resting on the block. And knowing where the head is resting on the block, think a long way down from your skull to your elbows. And think your elbows down into the floor and a little bit back away from each other. And it's just a thought. Don't let that thought go into a sneaky doing, because you'll pull yourself off the floor. So finally, we're going to bring our awareness to the feet. Two very definite contact points. And, you know, if we had an endless amount of time, we could then go through the feet, because there's contact points within the feet, but we don't, so we're not. So just as you're lying there, know where your feet are, know where your left foot is and your right foot. The toes, the little toes, the big toes, know where they are. So we're finding this balance between directing and non-doing. That would be the Alexander language. Or we're finding this balance between resting and weight and the thinking directions, your intentional thought, which is a widening back. Your intentional thought of the elbows going away from each other, but not at the cost of the rest of the arms, because they still want to be relaxed.